Welcome to another episode of... Okay, look, I'm sorry. I was looking at the topic and I saw the name. I lost my shit. I didn't understand it at first. Whenever you type in a topic up here and down at the bottom, it's like, hey, if you want credit for this, put your name. And someone was like, sure. If you want credit, put your name here. Sure. So today's question is brought to you by Sure, and asks, what makes a spooky/horror game a good game? Sure. You're not answering a question, you're signing your name. Sorry. Anyway, spooky games, I don't like them. All right, next episode. What makes a spooky/horror game a good game? Oh, buddy. I have a lot to say about this. And not everybody's going to agree with me on it, and that's okay. Fuck it. First of all, it is very well known that I don't like scary games because I'm, what's the word? A little bitch, okay? It is no secret. I'm a scaredy cat. Loud noises make me curl up in the fetal position, which, yes, I can curl up in the fetal position despite my size. Thank you for asking. You're lying! The reason I don't like scary games is because I'm a bitch. But what makes a scary game, a horror game, a spooky game, a spoopy game good? I'm so glad you asked. First of all, here's what a spooky game needs to not have in order to be good. Jump scares. Jump scares are cheap. Jump scares are what people use to scare you when they can't do it with the story or the environment or the sound design or the characters. Instead, they just rely on pure shock and awe to scare you, and that's called lazy. Write a good story that engages someone and scares the shit out of them on a psychological level instead of just going, boo, ha, ha, ha. Come on, you can do better than that. I think something to consider about whether or not a spooky game is good or not is in the game mechanics, and this is what separates it from like a movie or a TV show. You know, they don't have game mechanics because they're not games. It's in the name. In my opinion, some of the best horror games are the kind I really, really, really don't like. I would say, while I do not like the game at all, and you will never see me play it, Amnesia: The Dark Descent is one of the greatest horror games of all time. Now, I'm going to touch on that a lot more in detail here in a minute, but my point of why that is, for now, is that you have no way to fight back. That's only one of many reasons that it succeeds as a horror game. But it is important to note that games that don't have combat, games that make it to where you can't fight back, inherently have an advantage over the ones that do have weapons, do have ways for you to fight back. Now, again, I don't like Amnesia because you can't fight back. I don't like scary games where you can't fight back in any way, shape, or form. That shit terrifies me. Which I guess that means it's doing its job, but it also means I don't want to play it. A bit of a duality thing there. But the feeling of oppression is so crucial in a scary game to make you feel not just scared of what might be around the next corner, but scared of everything. Every creaking sound you might hear, every bird chirping in the distance. I mean, hell, like, imagine taking the sound of a bird chirping in the distance and somehow making it feel oppressive. Die. That's what a good scary game can do. And I'm going to touch on sound design in a minute because it's one of the most important things in a scary game. But that feeling of oppression, that feeling of stress, can get to you over time. And that is a sign of a good game. Because a bad one will have a lot of whoo at the beginning and then it falls off really hard. I think an example of a game that does that is Outlast. I think that Outlast starts off really interesting and really scary, and then it's just my opinion though. I'm sure other people love it. As I mentioned, psychological horror is one of the better ways to do it in my opinion, especially when it happens not only to you, but the character you're playing as. I think an example of that done really well is actually Dead Space. Not only are you experiencing the fear of everything around you, you can tell that your character is too, especially when you hear them breathing heavily, or screaming, or making a sound like that. It's like a double effect, and it's awesome. I actually really like Dead Space. Despite the fact it's a scary game, you can fight back. You get really cool and interesting weapons, and I think that's what elevates it to be a very good playable game for me, because I can't play Amnesia, but I can play Dead Space. I wouldn't really play Outlast ever again, but Resident Evil and Silent Hill, I really enjoy, because the psychological aspects are way better than the big, burly, beefy dude with a dick hanging out between his knees. Another thing I think that spooky video games do that is both good and bad is they're dark. And I don't mean they're like, ooh, these dark themes, these depressing things. No, I mean like actually just dark, as in the lack of light or low visibility. That can make it scary in its own way. That's more of an atmosphere thing. Atmosphere is super important, and your visibility being low is a way to enhance that atmosphere, especially if you give the player a way to temporarily enhance visibility. So if you have like night vision goggles, or a camera with some kind of night enhancement, like you might see in like Outlast or something, or maybe like a flare, something like Alan Wake. You know, like that game uses a motif of light and darkness.
Can you move it along? I'm all out of logos.
Increasing your visibility removes some of the tension. It removes some of the horror because now you have more information. You can see better. If you can't see anything and you hear, you're gonna freak the fuck out, right? But if it's like daytime and you're at Walmart and you're gonna be like, what the fuck is that? Who cares? It's light. You're fine. Now, it's not to say that a scary game has to take place at night or in a building or something. I mean, there are plenty of scary games that take place during the day. I can't think of any, but there are plenty. Trust me, I'm not bullshitting. Put up a game right there. But now we get to talk about my favorite thing in the world, sound design. So a scary game needs to have excellent sound design. And what I mentioned earlier, the behind you don't want that all the time, because then it would get boring. You want it in very particular situations, like maybe the lights flicker and go out, and then you hear that, and then the lights come back on, but there's nothing there. Now, how much more intense is that compared to the lights go out, you hear, they come on, and then there's just an enemy, and you kill him? It was pure sound design rather than a combat scenario, and it had a more profound effect on you. And that's actually something that overall, just even outside of sound design, that is super, super important. It's not to overplay your stuff. I actually give you a great example. Dead Space. It's not that far into the game, but there's a part where a necromorph runs like around the corner and into a vent. And you're like, oh my God, this motherfucker's gonna attack me. I know it. So you go around the corner, he's gone. That's it, he never comes back. But you thought he was. And you spent all that mental energy. You had all that tension, all that stress, all that anxiety, wondering when he was going to attack you. 10 minutes later, you go back through that area and you're like, oh my God, now he's going to get me. And now you're even more tense than you were the first time, because you're like, okay, if he didn't get me the first time, he's got to get me the second time. They're not just going to throw an enemy away. Yes, they are. He never comes back. And all that tension you had for something that was never going to happen. Genius. Back to sound design, though. I'm going to use Silent Hill as an example of really good sound design. I remember reading it somewhere at some point, maybe like 7 years ago or something, that for some of the sound effects in that game, they actually used like the sound of like washing machines and dryers banging around to have that like metallic, intense sound, and they like amplified it or something, whatever. Someone can fact check me. But using sounds like that, those oppressive, creepy, or intense sounds can enhance an area. I mean, here's a little experiment for you. Play a scary game with the volume muted. See how different it is. Sound design is so crucial, and people really don't realize it. The fact that you're able to know enemies are around you in Silent Hill is because your radio makes a staticky sound. So sound design is just almost like your radar in that game, which is a cool concept, especially since radar is supposed to be based off of sound anyway. But whatever. Now, I did want to talk about Amnesia and how it does things really well. Again, I'd like to say, I don't like Amnesia. I will never play the game because I'm a little bitch. But it does so many things right. And one of the biggest things that it does right, in my opinion, is the fact that you can't look at the enemies. It fucks you up. You look at it for too long, you're dead. That's just how the game works. The core fucking mechanic is you look at the enemies for too long, you're dead. So you can't just watch the enemy, wait for him to go by, and then go. You can't do that because you can't look at him. So you run into a room, you hide in a corner, and you don't look. You just hide. And you're like, oh my God, is he still there? Oh my God, I want to look and see, but if I look and see and he's still there, then that's even closer to death. Oh my God, I don't want to lose any of this progress. Oh my God, all right, I'm going to take a chance and look. And then you look and he's still there, and your screen starts doing that shaky shit, and you're freaking the fuck out. You can't just watch him and wait. You have to actively not watch him. Also, he's terrifying. Put a picture of that motherfucker up right there. Oh my God. Ooh, that's a game. Someone designed that for other people to see. But I think it works really, really well in the confines of the game because you aren't constantly looking at the enemy. The design of that enemy isn't constantly burned into your retinas, right? So sometimes you have to imagine where they are or what they look like or what they're doing. It forces your imagination to work overdrive, and that makes the scare that much more intense because it's partly the game and partly you scaring the shit out of yourself because you can't look at him. And every time you see him, you might notice a different detail. You turn around and he's like 2 inches from your fucking face and you shit your pants. Game's terrifying. Game does things really, really well, but because you can't fight back, it's really not my kind of game because, again, I'm a little bitch. Speaking of games you can fight back in, let's look at Resident Evil and Silent Hill from a more broad perspective rather than the little nitpicky details. So Resident Evil, especially the older ones, had really good weapons. Like OG Resident Evil, you could get a grenade launcher, I think you could get a Magnum, you could get a shotgun, you get some really solid weapons in that game. But the way that it makes the game still feel tense and in some places scary is the fact that you get decent amounts of handgun ammo, but the handgun isn't very effective. But you get the grenade launcher and you only get so much ammo, and it's not a lot. And what that creates is a scenario where you get into an encounter with like 3 zombies and you're like, well, this is probably going to take 12 or 13 handgun rounds, or I can use 1 grenade round and blow them all to hell. But if you start using all that grenade ammo now, you're not going to have any later. And what happens if you come across something that's worse than those zombies? And it forces you to constantly be considering your inventory, and that adds a layer of stress on top of it. Another example of that is the fact that your saves are limited. You can only save by having an item, and you better hope you have it in your inventory. Luckily, there are these boxes you can put all your stuff in, and then you can retrieve it, so you can just put them in there, and it's not really that big of a deal. But making your progress a consumable item is genius. It's genius. It's absolutely genius, because it forces you to think, should I save here? Maybe I could go like another 15 minutes, make a little more progress before I save. That way I don't burn out all my ribbons too quickly. And then you die and lose a bunch of progress. There's a level of stress that comes with the fear of losing progress, and it's so well done. But you know, the whole like grenade launcher thing, using your grenades too quickly and then not having them when you need them. I can think of another really good example of that, and that's a really phenomenal horror game, Alien Isolation. Spoilers, later in the game you get a flamethrower. That flamethrower, if that alien gets you like early in the game, you're dead. That's it. He sees you, he chases you, you better hope you can hide before he gets you. And if you can't, you're dead. But once you get that flamethrower, you can afford to make some mistakes, because he'll come up on you and you just light his ass on fire, right? But you don't have much ammo for that flamethrower. So that flamethrower is basically a get out of jail free card. You don't have very many of them. So do you use it now? Or do you hope maybe you can hide instead? Or do you take the death to strategically save your ammo for a later point in the game? It makes for an interesting game. It makes for an interesting risk-reward system in your head that can drastically change your perception of the game. It's really cool. Horror games can do stuff so interesting, and I love the concepts of them. You know, actually, that reminds me of another one. In Silent Hill, the very first Silent Hill, near the beginning of the game, after you wake up from getting stabbed to death by little, whatever the fuck those are, you wake up in a cafe, right? And you meet Sybil. And she's like, here, have a gun, don't shoot me by accident. You're like, okay, whatever. So you save your game, right? Because there's a save thing right there, and you're like, cool, I'm gonna save my game. And then you grab a radio, and a monster breaks through the window and attacks you in a room that has a save spot. Think about Resident Evil. You have rooms with typewriters where you can save, but those are safe rooms, especially in Resident Evil 2. Cue the music. When you go in a safe room in OG Resident Evil 2, you hear this music that is unique to save rooms. You have your box that has all your items in it, and you can save there, and it is a safe room. No zombies will come into that safe room. You're completely safe. And then Silent Hill, at the very beginning of the game, completely subverts your expectations by having a monster attack you in the same room in which there's a safe space. Because they do that at the beginning of the game, in the back of your mind for the rest of the game, when you go to save, you'll be like, I wonder if there's something here. Because you remember that one time at the beginning, I got attacked in the same room. This is bad. I could get attacked here. I need to save and I need to move. It adds stress to every single room that has a save square in it. And all they had to do was throw one monster at you at the beginning of the game. It's genius, and it pays dividends for the horror aspects. I love it. It's incredible. Anyway, I feel like I've been blathering on this topic for a while, so thank you, Sure. Sorry. Thank you, Sure, for the topic. And yeah, that's all I got for you guys. So thanks for watching. Share it, that kind of stuff, like I say every time. And just remember, push it. Push it real good. We'll see you next time.